Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of my Girl Talk series. If this is your first time on the channel, hi, my name is Brielle. In this series, we have very cozy heart-to-heart chats, sleepover-esque energy. If you do enjoy this episode of the series, definitely make sure you subscribe because I come out with a new episode every single month. I'm going to go grab a little snack and a little drink because your girl is actually starving. I was just outside taking photos for a thumbnail and it drained all of my energy. Okay, I have this matcha from Clark Street, which is my favorite little bakery, and I got a granola bar as well. We're gonna be talking about body image, pretty privilege, and kind of the trends that we see with bodies, how bodies can become trends, and how in the last couple years, we're starting to see a kind of scary body standard come back into style. I think it's kind of appropriate for me to be filming this with the holidays coming up because I feel like the holidays can be a tough time for body image. Sorry, I'm gonna open this so that it's not distracting. The holidays can be a tough time for body image for a lot of us, I think, for a number of reasons. One, there's a lot of food involved in the holidays. We're eating treats, sweets, things that we wouldn't normally eat. We're eating a lot, and that's great. We love that, but it can come with sort of a mental struggle for those of us who maybe are struggling a bit with body image or have not always had the best relationship with our body. And also, the holidays are like a weird check-in of like where you are at, in the sense that you're seeing family that maybe you haven't seen in a long time. Relatives can tend to give unsolicited comments about your appearance, so it kind of feels like you're on display. You can't help but compare yourself to maybe where you were last year or 2 years ago. Before we get into the meat of this video, I just want to say that if you're easily triggered by discussions about body weight, body image, this might not be the video for you. I just want to like put a trigger warning out there because we are going to be talking about skinniness, about bodies as trends, about body image. So if any of those topics could be potentially triggering for you, just consider this a warning that we are going to be talking about those things in this video, obviously. This video is kind of inspired by other creators. Maddie Drosbeck talked a little bit about the return of 90s/early 2000s body standards in a recent podcast episode. Amina, who's one of my subscribers, talked about redefining the beauty standard in her recent Girl Talk episode. All of this kind of got me thinking, in addition to what I've seen on social media in terms of changing body standards. So specifically, TikTok comes to mind. I feel like as soon as TikTok started rising, I noticed this return of the very skinny model-like body being very much praised, and these very skinny girls doing these get ready with me TikToks where they can wear anything and everything. They can wear the baggiest clothes, they can wear the weirdest items, and somehow it just works because they have this super skinny frame. Everyone praising them and their fashion sense. This was something that I feel like was very reminiscent of the Tumblr days, the girls on Pinterest. It's not something that has been super heavily a part of social media culture during the 2010s, but I feel like in the last couple of years, specifically since the pandemic, I'm seeing it more and more. And I think the fashion trends that have been happening during this time are very much linked to this body standard revival. Like when you think of fairy core or leg warmers or all of these more recent trends, you know, I'm participating in the like sweatery knit trend right now, but a lot of these trends came hand in hand with the glorification of extremely skinny body types. Like when you think of like the leg warmer trend or the fairy core trend, you're imagining very thin limbs, a very skinny frame. Obviously there's nothing wrong with that body type, right? I'm not in any way trying to hate on any body type, and I think it's important that we are cognizant of that in this conversation, that some people are just naturally very skinny. But I do think it's kind of concerning when you see body types kind of trending like this, and I think because of the 2022 consciousness in our brains that knows, hey, we should be body inclusive, hey, we should be body positive, people won't admit this, right? They won't admit that they like and follow a certain person because they have this ideal skinny body type. They won't admit that we're making the 90s skinny body trendy again, or that they really desperately want to look like that. We're less likely to admit that than we were maybe 20 or 30 years ago because we all are a little bit more woke, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. And the proof is kind of in the pudding with the fact that these influencers and these images of these skinny girls are so viral and are so praised, and that we view them as having this incredible fashion sense when really they're just putting together odd items, but it somehow works because they fit the beauty standard. Like that is proof enough that this is happening, whether we want to admit it to ourselves on a societal level or not. This is something that Maddie talked about in her podcast episode that I honestly hadn't really thought about that much. The trending body in the 2010s, this slim, thick, Kim Kardashian, Kylie Jenner-esque body that was really glorified after, you know, the super skinny model type body was out, right? Even though that slim, thick, curvy trend was still not great and bodies shouldn't be trends at all, and it's still kind of messed up, and you know, that came with surgeries, etc. I'm not claiming that this BBL era was perfect, but I think what it provided for a lot of us more average weight, average build type of girls, the slim thick body trend provided a lot of acceptance for those of us who did have a little bit more curves, you know? Things like cellulite or wider hips, a bigger butt, etc. Those things used to not be glorified. Like, it always shocks me when I see media from, I don't know, the 80s, the 90s, I don't know when this was really happening, but media that used to say like wide hips was a negative, now it's so glorified, it's so positive, right? And that is partially thanks to the slim thick trend and kind of the acceptance and glorification of curves, which I think really did do some positive things in terms of just normalizing the fact that bodies do have cellulite, they stick out in different places, etc. It moved us away from this need to be as small as possible, as tiny and slim as possible, which I think is a great positive. Even if it did come with some unrealistic standards about the perfect hourglass shape, at least more curvy, more realistic bodies were starting to be praised. The 2010s were a lot more positive of a place for bodies than like the early 2000s or the 90s. Like, we saw the Aerie campaigns pushing like body diversity and modeling, even though it's still a very exclusive, very body negative industry, started to become a little bit more inclusive. We saw more plus size models and brands like Savage X Fenty rising up that were including a variety of body sizes in their marketing. All of this was very positive for body image, right? And it was still incredibly flawed and still is incredibly flawed. But there was this sort of normalization of the average body, and it was liberating. Like, I feel like it was really helpful to a lot of us on our body image journeys to see some more acceptance and some more realness in media and society. And I don't think by any means that we're going to go back to the complete and utter blatant toxicity that we saw in the 90s and 2000s. Like, I don't think we're going to start seeing hot or not or worst beach bods lists in magazines. Like, that was a thing in the 90s and 2000s. Thinking about that now is unfathomable that they would get away with that. Like, posting blown up beach body pictures of like celebrities looking even slightly chunky or like not pristinely skinny. Like, how is that acceptable? How is that the norm in magazines? Magazines were deeply fucked up a couple decades ago, and they still aren't the best, honestly. But I don't think we're gonna see that. Like, I don't think we're gonna see that extreme of body negativity. But even though I don't think we're regressing back to that, I also don't think we've made as much progress as we think we have. Like I mentioned, modeling industry, I feel like is a massive example of this. I mean, 90% of the modeling industry is still dominated by extremely skinny models who are honestly a very, very rare and small percentage body type. Out and about, I feel like you rarely see those bodies, except, you know, since living in LA, I would say I see them more. But in general, that's a very rare body type. For it to consume so much of the modeling industry is honestly evidence that we are not as progressive as we like to think we are in terms of body image. And I think another bit of evidence that this is still very much ingrained in our culture, this body negativity sort of mentality, is just the way we speak to each other. I was at work and I heard a coworker basically say, "Oh, I'm constantly teetering between like eating as much as I want and just like starving myself." And another one of my coworkers was like, "Yeah, I feel you, girl." And I was like, are we making jokes about starving ourselves in 2023? 2022, but still about to be 2023. Like, you gotta be kidding. It was so normalized, so brushed over, as if this is like something we can all relate to, you know? This is the female experience, constantly debating between eating what you want and starving yourself. That was so disturbing to me to hear. And even, you know, things we hear from the women around us, like, I can't tell you how many times my mom has eaten a treat and said, "Ooh, I'm being bad, like I'll have to be good tomorrow and only eat salad." This type of stuff is so normalized, and it really perpetuates a very very negative, very push and pull relationship with food that comes with so much guilt and so much toxicity. And it's so disturbing to me hearing the ways that we talk about food and the ways we talk about dieting and our bodies and the self-hating language that is so normalized in society. The normalization of these things in our culture still is like deeply disturbing. So I think that a very healthy thing for us all to try and do is to sort of unlearn the beauty standard, to detach ourselves from how we feel like we're supposed to look, the one image of beauty that all of us have ingrained in our brains from society's programming. I think it's really healthy for all of us to strive to unlearn that, detach from it, try and discard it. But something else I want to talk about in this video that makes it personally more difficult for me to try and unlearn the beauty standard is pretty privilege. We live in a society that very blatantly favors pretty people in so many different ways. And to ignore that and to just say, don't care about that, forget it, I think is kind of an unrealistic way to look at things. It's super frustrating that things are set up like this and that our brains have been programmed this way, but there are very concrete, undeniable benefits to being as close to the beauty standard as possible. And again, this is deeply fucked up. Like, I am not trying to say we should all be trying to be prettier because we live in a society that loves prettiness. So just like stop trying to fight it and go make yourself hot. Go get some surgeries. That is so not what I'm trying to say. The reason that I am talking about this is because it is deeply fucked up. It's a reality that we have to accept and take into consideration, but it is very deeply fucked that pretty privilege is such a thing and it is so prevalent in our society. I found this quote in an article. I was doing a little bit of research for this video, really getting into it. I found a quote in this article. It was from some like state newspaper or something, but it says, attractive people are more likely to be employed, are paid higher wages, are more likely to be approved for a loan, negotiate loans with better terms, and have better looking and higher status spouses. So this isn't just an ego thing. This is like your level of pretty privilege can impact whether you can get a job, whether you can get a loan for a house. Like, this is insane. I also once read an article that my boyfriend had sent me. I swear these sources are reputable. They were all like scientifically researched articles, but basically the article said that the number one biggest determining factor for predicting success is attractiveness. So basically, there's a plane going by. Please hold. So basically, attractiveness is the biggest indicator for whether you will or won't be successful. And that's a correlation, right? It's not like every attractive person is going to be a millionaire and every less conventionally attractive person is going to have no success at all. It's not that black and white, but there is this huge correlation between attractiveness and success. Not to mention the halo effect. The halo effect means that upon a first impression, highly attractive people are presumed by others to have a variety of positive personality traits, such as altruism, stability, and intelligence compared to less attractive people. So when you are meeting people for the first time, they're more likely to think that you're intelligent, have something to offer, have a good personality if you're attractive. Like, we assume other positive traits about attractive people. So because of all this knowledge and the fact that beauty does have benefits, it kind of creates this internal conflict in my brain where when I tell myself I want to detach from the beauty standard, I want to stop worrying about it, stop striving to be closer to that standard, it almost feels like I'm lying to myself and I almost can't believe myself because there's part of my brain that's like, but it'll benefit you a lot if you get hotter. It takes some balls to admit that, right? Like, I would love to come on camera and be like, I've done so much internal personal work. I have a 100% like detached view on the beauty standard and I don't give a shit about it, but it's just not the reality. I think a lot of us are more in this in-between sort of zone where we're still very much affected by the way that society views beauty and is very biased towards attractive individuals, but we also are sort of waking up to and wanting to reframe / detach from that beauty standard and move further from it, widen our perception of beauty, and shed those old restrictive narratives and standards. So I think a lot of us are in this weird middle ground where it's like we can't claim that we're fully freed from and detached from society because that just wouldn't be real, but also we're aware of how deeply fucked up beauty standards are and we want to be free of them. And I think the more that I learn about, body positivity and am exposed to creators and information from people who are encouraging creating a more body positive culture, I'm increasingly confronted with my own biases and how, as a product of this society, I am equally guilty as everyone else for perpetuating these standards. Whether I want to admit it or not, just as much as everyone else, I do hold attractive people, pretty people on a pedestal. You know, being more drawn to and wanting to be around attractive, pretty people. And also in my relationship with my own body, I've bought into beauty standards my entire life, you know? I've gone through toxic phases of desperately wanting to lose weight. I've tried, you know, crazy diets that made me like almost pass out, especially as a kid and in middle school and high school. I struggled a lot with my body and my weight fluctuations, which I've had a lot of throughout my life. There have been times where I've been heavier. There's been times where I've been super skinny, down to like 110 pounds as an adult, which in my mind is very skinny, relatively, of course. And also as a photographer, some of you might know this from me mentioning it in the past, but I do photography. You can see some of my work on my Instagram if you want to check it out. But as a photographer, I work with a lot of skinny girls, which like isn't the most inclusive and body positive thing for me to be doing. I'm definitely feeding into the stereotypes of typical models. My camera died, so sorry if the angle is slightly different. Since kind of learning more about body image, how our body image is influenced by society, etc., I definitely feel like I've made strides. I've made improvements in how I view others, in sort of widening my scope of what beautiful is, and making progress in just being more inclusive, accepting, positive, seeing the beauty of others. But something I've been confronted with over the past year specifically, you know, as I have gone through a weight gain and a lot of my old clothes don't fit me anymore, my size has gone up, I've had to reckon with all of this, and I've really realized that it is difficult for me to give myself the same grace and same acceptance, same love as I give other women. It's a lot easier for me to have a more inclusive and positive mindset around others than it is for me towards myself. I think a lot of us can relate to that, you know? We would never, ever, ever talk to or think about others in the same negative, harsh ways that we sometimes talk to ourselves, you know? Especially those of us who have struggled with body image. I think it's a pretty universal sentiment that we would never judge others in the way that we judge our own bodies, right? It's a lot easier to see the beauty in others sometimes than it is to see the beauty in ourselves. So this is something that I'm trying to work on. One of my goals for this month, if you guys saw my December reset, is to work on my mental relationship with my body, how I speak to myself, how I regard myself, etc. So this is kind of like a very vulnerable conversation to have because it's not just me preaching body positivity. I wanted to be really honest about kind of my own experiences, my own thoughts, and it can be really difficult to confront the parts of ourselves that we aren't proud of, maybe the areas that still need more work and more attention. But I think it's important to be honest about how society has impacted us, how the very strict beauty standards that have been shoved down our throats since birth affect us. I think we are responsible for the ways that we perpetuate these standards, for the way that we speak to each other, the way we speak about our own bodies. This is something that I am actively working on, watching my mouth, making sure that I'm not spitting out any toxic diet culture, fat phobia, etc. While we should be working on unlearning these things and improving our own participation, I also think it's important that we recognize that we're victims too, and we didn't decide to think this way. This is the most natural way for us to think based on the society we were born into, right? We didn't choose these standards. We didn't choose these norms. We didn't decide what conventional beauty is. We were born into this society and we've been sort of swept up in all of it, but there are things that we can do to free ourselves, honestly, from the pressures and the strict standards of the beauty standard. And this doesn't just apply to bodies and body types. This applies to facial features. This applies to hair. We have a beauty standard for everything, you know, the small button nose, the big plump lips, the long eyelashes. These are all standards, and unless you fit that very precise mold, you are bred to have insecurities. It sucks that we feel we need to compare ourselves to this very individual one idea of beauty and this one standard, but that's how our society is set up. There have been things about myself that I've changed, things that I've done to honestly become closer to the beauty standard or to be more conventionally attractive. You know, I'm not anti-plastic surgery. I've talked on this channel before that I got my nose done in high school. Like, I'm not gonna be a saint on my high horse being like, don't change yourself for anyone, because those things did have repercussions in my life. You know, I was treated better after I got my nose done. This is also tough to admit and tough to talk about, because I don't think the message here is go change everything about yourself and become the beauty standard. But I also think it would be naive for me to sit on here and be like, love every single part of yourself just how you are and never change a thing, as someone who has changed a thing. You know? I do think though that regardless what your position is on plastic surgery or altering your appearance, I think that we all deserve to love ourselves as we are in this current moment, whether we want to change things down the line or not. The note that I want to leave you with is to give yourself softness, to give yourself compassion, to free yourself as much as possible from the pressure to fit those ideals. It's not easy, but you deserve that peace. You deserve to love and accept yourself as you currently are. And that's the sweet note that I want to end this video on. I hope that you guys enjoyed this very candid, very real conversation. If you made it to the end of the video, I would love if you would thumbs this video up, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below on anything that I talked about in this video. This is a safe space. I want us to have an open and genuine conversation. I will see you guys next week with another video, and next month with another installment of this series. Bye guys.
Yeah, his baby said that they don't got a future like it burns. So give him something worse to kill his head with, make him forget somehow.